Imagine a world suddenly gripped by an invisible enemy, a disease so terrifying it wiped out entire populations and reshaped civilizations forever. This was the Black Death, the deadliest pandemic in human history, an apocalyptic event that swept across continents in the mid-14th century. From 1346 to 1353, this devastating plague claimed an estimated 75 to 200 million lives, utterly transforming medieval society. But what was this mysterious killer? How did it spread so rapidly? And what was its profound, chilling legacy? Most historians agree it began in the Central Asian steppes, possibly in the Kyrgyz region. To understand the Black Death, we first look to its origins. These fleas, in turn, infested rodents, particularly the black rat. The culprit was the bacterium Yersinia pestis, a highly virulent pathogen that primarily infects fleas. The disease then traveled along the bustling Silk Route, the ancient trade network connecting east and west. Merchants and their goods, unknowingly carrying infected rats and fleas, became vectors for the plague's unstoppable march. One of the most infamous early occurrences was the Siege of Kaffa, a Gernos trading post in Crimea. In 1346, Mongol forces, besieging the city, reputedly catapulted plague-ridden corpses over the walls, infecting the inhabitants. Fleeing Gernos ships then carried the infected rats and fleas across the Black Sea, first to Constantinople, and then rapidly into the Mediterranean basin, from major port cities like Messina in Sicily and Pisa in Italy. The plague spread with horrifying speed. The most common was the bubonic plague, characterized by swollen, painful lymph nodes called buboes, often in the armpits, groin, or neck. Its arrival in Europe in 1347 marked the beginning of a relentless onslaught that would decimate populations. There were three main forms of the disease. Victims of the bubonic form also suffered from fever, chills, vomiting, and extreme weakness. It had a terrifying mortality rate of 30 to 75%. Instead, they attributed the plague to divine punishment, astrological alignments, or miasma bader. The pneumonic plague attacked the lungs, causing victims to cough up blood, making it highly contagious through airborne droplets. This form was almost always fatal. The rarest and almost universally fatal was the septicemic plague, which infected the bloodstream, causing widespread internal bleeding and tissue death. The speed of death was horrifying. Victims could go from perfectly healthy to gravely ill within days, often dying within a week of symptoms appearing. For others, faith was shattered in the face of such overwhelming suffering. Medieval understanding of disease was primitive. They had no knowledge of bacteria or fleas. Law and order often broke down. Fear and paranoia were rampant, leading to scapegoating. Doctors, limited by their knowledge, could do little but offer futile remedies like bloodletting, sweating, or lancing the buboes. The sheer scale of death was unprecedented. Entire villages were wiped out. Cities became ghost towns in many places. There were simply not enough healthy people to bury the dead, leading to mass graves. Estimates suggest that 30 to 60% of Europe's population perished. Religious devotion intensified for some, as people sought divine intervention. Cities, with their dense populations, were hit particularly hard. Flagellants, groups of penitents who publicly whipped themselves, emerged, believing their self-punishment would atone for sins and appease God. The traditional system of land-bound serfs working for their lords became unsustainable. Society struggled to cope. Life became cheaper, but also, for some, more precious. This led to a mix of hedonism and fervent piety. The danse macabre, dance of death, became a common artistic motif, depicting death as an equalizer uniting all social classes. Jewish communities, already marginalized, were often blamed for the plague, accused of poisoning wells. This led to horrific pogroms and massacres across Europe. Surviving peasants and laborers found they could demand higher wages and better working conditions. The plague's impact on population was devastating. In some regions, the death toll was even higher, reaching 70 to 80%. The economic consequences were profound. With so many laborers dead, there was a drastic shortage of workers. This shifted the balance of power. Feudalism, already in decline, received a death blow. Money, rather than labor, became a more common form of payment. Landowners, desperate for labor, were forced to offer more attractive terms, including free tenure, to entice workers. Agricultural practices changed, with less labor-intensive forms of farming becoming more common. Some marginal lands were abandoned. The drastic reduction in population also meant less demand for food, leading to lower food prices in some areas. The plague also had significant social and psychological effects. There was a shift in focus towards the present moment, as death could strike at any time. Art and literature began to reflect the grim realities. The medical profession was forced to confront its limitations, leading to a greater emphasis on observation and a slow shift away from purely traditional remedies. Universities and intellectual life were also disrupted, but new medical faculties were established, and the traditional authority of the Church was questioned. The Church itself faced a crisis. Many priests and monks died tending to the sick, and some fled, leading to a perceived failure of religious leadership. This undermined the Church's authority and paved the way for future religious reforms and challenges centuries later. Despite its devastating immediate impact, the Black Death also inadvertently catalyzed long-term changes that contributed to the eventual emergence of the Renaissance and modern society. The labor shortage empowered the common worker, fostering greater social mobility with fewer people. There was more land and resources available per capita for the survivors, potentially leading to improved living standards for some. The questioning of traditional authority, both secular and religious, helped foster a spirit of inquiry and individualism. The Black Death was not a single event. It returned in subsequent waves, though never with the same initial devastating impact. For centuries, however, the great pandemic of the 14th century fundamentally altered the course of European history. It accelerated the decline of feudalism, reshaped economic systems, and profoundly impacted social structures and cultural beliefs. It stands as a stark reminder of humanity's vulnerability to disease, but also of its resilience and capacity for a change in the face of unimaginable catastrophe. The Black Death's legacy is etched into the very fabric of our shared human story, a testament to a time when death rode on a scale never before witnessed.